In this video, we're going to go into more detail talking about sexual reproduction in true ferns. So ferns also exhibit the alternation of generations. So we'll start with the multicellular diploid sporophyte stage, because that is the dominant stage in true ferns and really in all plants except for the non-vascular seedless plants. All other plants have the sporophyte generation as being more dominant or more noticeable. So when you see a fern, what you're seeing are the sporophytes. And we talked about how some leaves are known as sporophylls. And ferns are one example of a plant that has leaves that are sporophylls. So on the underside of a fern's leaf, there are these sori, singular would be sorus. And inside the sorus, there are sporangia, which are organs that produce spores. The sporangia are going to go through meiosis. So remember, with meiosis, we go from a 2N cell to make 1N or haploid cells. And so within this sorus, within the sporangia, haploid, unicellular haploid spores are being produced. If these unicellular haploid spores find a suitable place to germinate, mitosis is going to occur. And remember, with mitosis, if we start out haploid, the daughter cells also have to be haploid. So the spores are ultimately going to develop into multicellular haploid gametophytes, also known as a prothallus. And that is what we are showing down here in these pictures. So this gametophyte is kind of a heart-shaped structure. You can see that here as well. It's a little bit harder to see on this image, but this heart-shaped structure is the gametophyte. And the gametophyte develops male and female gametangia. So remember that the male gametangium is known as an antheridium, or plural is antheridia, and the female gametangia are known as archegonia. And so the archegonia are these little structures right here, and then the antheridia are these little structures right here. Cells in the male gametangium and female gametangium are going to go through mitosis. Now remember that these gametangia are haploid. So mitosis, the haploid parent cells are going to produce haploid daughter cells. So ultimately we end up with haploid gametes. And the male gametes are these sperm with a flagella. And the female gamete is an egg. During fertilization, the male gamete, which remember is this sperm with a flagellum, is going to swim to the egg. And they are going to merge together in order to form a zygote. Now the sperm has chromosomes in it. Remember, it's haploid, so it has one set of chromosomes. The egg is haploid, so it has one set of chromosomes. But the zygote is going to be diploid because now those chromosomes have come together to pair up. So remember, the gametes are haploid. But when you take a haploid cell and merge it with another haploid cell, you end up with a diploid zygote. And the zygote is retained in the archegonium, which remember the archegonium is the female structure, and it helps to protect and nourish the developing embryo. So when we left off on the previous slide, we talked about how the zygote retained in the archegonium for protection and nourishment. And that zygote is going to go through mitosis. So this diploid zygote is going to make more daughter cells that are also diploid. And ultimately, it's going to form a multicellular diploid sporophyte, which is where we started. And so remember that this alternation of generations is a cycle. And so we are essentially constantly switching between the gametophyte and sporophyte stages. So here's an overview of the alternation of generations in a true fern. So we'll start with the sporophyte stage. Remember that the sporophyte is multicellular and the cells are diploid. Sporangia form underneath the sporophyte. And these sporangia are going to go through meiosis in order to form spores. Remember that with meiosis, we take a diploid cell and we make haploid daughter cells. And these spores are these unicellular haploid daughter cells produced by meiosis. If those spores find a suitable place to germinate, they will go through mitosis. And remember that one end, that haploid, can only produce other haploid cells. And so it will go through mitosis in order to form the gametophyte, which is this kind of heart-shaped structure right here. Now within this gametophyte, there are male and female parts. The male part is the antheridium, and it produces sperm. And the female part is the archegonium, and it produces eggs. And so during fertilization, the sperm is going to fertilize the egg, producing a zygote. And a zygote is unicellular, and it is diploid. It goes through mitosis, and since it's diploid, it can only produce more diploid cells. And so it ultimately ends up creating another sporophyte, which is multicellular and diploid. And then the cycle goes on and on.